Hi, I'm Michaela Keaton. I'm a law professor at the University of Saskatchewan, where I teach in the area of dispute resolution. And I'm speaking with you on behalf of the National Committee for the competition, the CNNC, the Canadian National Negotiation Competition event. I want to thank you first for being a judge. It's an incredibly important role in what we think is an incredibly important event. Negotiation is, I think, as we all know, at the heart of being a lawyer, and this national moot is a really unique chance for law students from around the country to come together and develop their skills and receive feedback. So in this competition, or in this video, I am going to talk you through some information about the competition structure and your role. First, I want to emphasize that our objective as a national committee is for this event to be educational. So yes, it's competitive, and in the law school setting, we love competitions. And of course, there will be a first and second and third place winner and a few awards. But at the heart of this is really community. It's about community building, networking among the students, their coaches, and members of the profession, lawyers and the judiciary, and the business community who are coming together. So most importantly, it's about mentoring of these law students. They're mentored through their coaches as they get ready in the lead up to this event, and they're also mentored in their interactions with you. So they negotiate in 3 rounds throughout the course of the competition. The first 2 rounds are 2-party processes, and they always negotiate in teams of 2 lawyers. The third round is multi-party. As the teams negotiate in a round, they're observed and they're judged by a panel of 2 to 4 judges, which includes you. So law students from around the country will be competing, but you won't know what parts of Canada they're from or what schools they're representing until you're finished judging. Once you're finished judging completely in the event, it's okay for you to ask them where they're from, but not if you have any future rounds to judge. Anonymity is important for the integrity of the event. And of course, any conversations with students about where they're from would only happen after your judging tasks are finished. Just to, again, mitigate against any perceptions of bias. So what does each round look like? Well, it goes through a number of stages. It'll take a couple of hours to get through a round, but here's how it works. So after the judges get settled in the room and the students are settled in the room, they're actually going to break off to start with a pre-negotiation self-analysis, which is 5 minutes per team. And they do that separately with you when the other team is not in the room. So one team goes first, then the other team comes in and goes second. And then once those steps are done, then all 4 come back in, or all who are competing come back in, and the negotiation round begins. In the pre-negotiation analysis, there is no interaction between the judging panel and the students, no questions, no discussion. The negotiation will go for 50 minutes in rounds 1 and 2, or 70 minutes in round 3. And within that, each team can call a caucus once. And if a team calls a caucus, then all of the students must leave the room. So in rounds 1 and 2, there could be 2 caucuses of up to 5 minutes each. Students are responsible for keeping track of the time themselves, but one judge on your panel will also be tracking time, and we will have a time tracking sheet to give you. Once the negotiation round is finished, all students will leave the room, and they will have 10 minutes to reflect and get ready for their final presentation to the panel. And during that 10 minutes, you will be recording some of your comments and your scoring and getting ready to do your ranking. I'll say more about that in a moment. Then the students come back in one team at a time, and they have 5 minutes to make a post-negotiation self-analysis presentation to the panel. That is not a time for interaction with the panel. The only time a panelist could ask a question would be if you need to clarify something that will affect how you're judging that team. Otherwise, the interactions between the judging panel and the students will come at a later stage. So once all of these self-analysis presentations are done, again, all of the students leave the room, and judges have 10 more minutes to finish up their scoring and decide on their ranking, first and second, or further if it's the multi-party round. And it's vitally important that judges do that independently. So these are not panels where judges are trying to reach consensus or are even discussing with one another. The only way the competition has integrity is if every single judge who sees a team is making an independent assessment of that team's strengths. And so you will not be able to talk with your judging colleagues about what they think until after you are finished your ranking and we've picked up the sheets. Okay, so in a competition, each round you have 3 judging tasks. So you will be scoring against the competition criteria, and I will explain that further in a moment. And as I just mentioned, you will also be ranking, and that's really the most important piece of data. The outcomes are pretty much driven by how you rank the teams first, second. And the final task, we think the most important, is the giving feedback. And again, I mentioned judging is an individual task, but let me tell you a bit more about scoring. Before I move on to the scoring sheet and what you're scoring for, I just want to say a word about the relationship between ranking and scoring. There are 2 different ways you can do this. Some judges prefer to just track the scoring against the scoring sheet and then make an overall assessment based on their instincts at the end about which was the most effective team. If you do it that way, then you need to go back and take a look at your scoring and make sure that that lines up with the conclusion you reach, that team A or team B was the winner, the most effective in that round. Other judges do it more mathematically, so they'll score on the different criteria, and then they will add up the scores and see who got the most points. And either one is fine. It's definitely okay to make an intuitive assessment at the end about which you think was the most effective team, as long as it's being governed by the competition criteria. So what are you scoring for? There are a number of values and criteria for success in this negotiation competition, and I'm going to show you a scoring sheet in a moment, but here are the variables. We're looking for generally these criteria. So the way that the teams manage information gathering and giving, are they advancing their clients' goals and interests throughout? How are they adapting to things that are coming at them in the process? How prepared do they seem? How well are they listening? What kinds of listening skills are they using? Can they explain their client's priorities effectively? Are they relationship building across the table? Where appropriate and how appropriate? How effective is their teamwork with one another? And how perceptive are they when they're reflecting and analyzing how the negotiation went, and are they meeting ethical obligations? So those are generally the criteria. I'll show you in a moment the scoring sheet. There are a range of scores, and we really encourage you to use the range from 1 to 7 in the scoring, with 4 being the neutral one. And let me stop sharing and show you right now the competition criteria sheet. Where is that? Okay. Here we go. So this is a competition criteria sheet that you will have printed and in front of you. It has some reminders on the first page. And then you'll see that it allows you to track for Team A and Team B how they are doing on these number of criteria. So under every question is a number of variables from 1 to 7. 7 is the best score, and 7 means excellent, and 1 means poor. But 4 means as expected and neutral. And that's really important. Some judges like to they don't want to be mean, and so they'll give 6 and 7 to all of the students. And honestly, that doesn't help us with the assessment in the end. So use 4 as your starting point. And if they do something to impress you on that variable, then move it up to 5, 6, or 7. If they are disappointing on that variable, then move it down to 3, 2, or 1. So here are the variables. How skillful was the team in obtaining and using the relevant information? How skillful were they in providing information while protecting confidential or negative information? How effective was the team in using the time available in light of the client's interests and goals? How well did they adapt their strategy to new information? How prepared were they? To what extent were they perceptive and skillful at reading the other team's cues? To what extent did they appear to be reasonable and realistic? How persuasive and convincing were they? Did the way the team managed its relationship with the other team contribute to achieving their client's interests? How effective was the team in working together, backing each other up, sharing responsibility? And then to what extent did the outcome of the session, regardless of whether agreement was reached, serve the client's goals? Then after the self-analysis, you will rank on 3 more criteria, which is how effective were they in planning, anticipating challenges, and assessing their own strategy? How accurate were they in assessing the effectiveness of their strategy and performance? And then how adequately did they seem to learn from today's negotiation? There is a question here about the violation of ethical standards. We take that very seriously. A breach of ethics is basically a disqualification in the competition. And essentially that would have to be a pretty egregious error on their part. You will see that there is room to interpret the facts different ways and the instructions of the clients, and we take that into account. We understand that. But if they do something which is an absolute violation of their client's instructions, or they act unethically in the process, that's something you should draw attention to here, but probably come to talk to one of us who are involved in the competition. Okay, so now I am going to go back to the PowerPoint slide and we will move forward. So now, how do you decide what's most effective overall? I want to point out here that this competition is more about process and skills than it is about outcomes. There are many different ways a problem can be resolved. Judgments and advice on what would have been a better outcome here won't be as good of a learning opportunity for the students. And one of the criteria is, of course, whether the outcome served the client's interests. But beyond that, the focus isn't on whether you think the best terms of a deal were reached. It's on the skills the students were using along the way. So a good outcome is better than the best alternative that could have been reached outside the table, satisfies the interests of the clients and all of the folks around the table, adopts a solution that considers there are a range of options here, is legitimate, doesn't leave anyone feeling taken, involves clear commitments, communication that's efficient, well understood, and results in an enhanced working relationship. So that's generally the orientation of our competition. Okay, so in deciding what's most effective, we are all influenced by our own ideas about that. The CNNC is committed to creating educational opportunities that are fully inclusive. We are trying to move forward with goals that truly respect our objectives around equity, and allowing room for diversity and difference. And so one example is that we've adopted a dress code that reflects that to try and combat traditional notions of what a strong, effective lawyer should look like and how they should dress. So students are encouraged to dress as they're comfortable and as is culturally appropriate for them, as one example. So this is an important moment here to talk about the unconscious biases that might affect judging processes. So as you, I'm sure, understand, unconscious bias can be related to variables such as race and ethnicity, gender identity, age, and just general appearances or behavior. And these can especially show up around oral advocacy. Because we are judging someone's patterns of speech, the way they relate to others, and so on. So we just have to throw out a couple of tips here. Remember to have a moment of introspection to challenge yourself. The research shows that if we take a few moments to ask ourselves what biases might be at play, that we're less likely to be influenced by those biases. And so when you're engaging in your judging process, try and create those moments of mindful decisions. And in the end, focusing on the competition criteria will help with that. And it'll also help design feedback for the students that is really about the skills and not about other things that might be surrounding it. Also focusing on the judging criteria helps us ensure that judging is consistent across the competition and invites you to really focus on what's going on underneath in terms of the skills that students are using, even if they're doing it differently. So the way they're gathering information, they're speaking to client interests, collaborating and showing leadership in the process, and that might show up in different ways and in an inclusive environment and one that embraces diversity. So that brings me to the most important task, again, giving feedback where your mentorship shows up. So here we have some suggestions. Be specific in the comments that you're making and balance positive feedback and constructive criticism. So again, this is, I know, sounds simplistic, but we like to use this. Mention a strength of the students, mention something that they can change, and then end with something that is encouraging for them. And when you are mentioning a strength and mentioning something that they can change, really try to base that on a skill that shows up in the competition criteria and is very specific with an example, that sort of thing, and try and keep it focused to 2 or 3 pieces of feedback for a team. Okay, so that brings me to the very end here, where I want to say once again, thank you for taking on this important role. We appreciate it, and the students appreciate it even more. If you have any questions, there are ways for you to reach out and ask those, and we look forward to seeing you at the event.